Got to thank you for joining me here today. I'm going to install this C3 PowerSports Synchro drive in our crew member Ryan's sled. It's a 2013 Freeride. He's tricking it out, getting it ready for the powder, different suspension, gearing it up a little differently. Now C3 sent us this. They've upgraded a bunch of their parts. They're always upgrading their parts, making their product better and better. Now this is the old belt they used to use. Used to leave a little bit of blue dust inside your housing. Kind of a dirty thing. But they've upgraded to this one here. He's got a whole bunch of explanations why it works better. I'm not going to get into that, but it does. Now you might be a little skeptical about a belt drive. You might think, hey, it's not going to be as strong as my chain. Well, you're wrong. These things are actually very strong. If you have them set up right, no problem at all. Harleys have belt drives, cars and trucks, big motors have them, timing gears. They've been used for a long time, tried and true, not a problem at all. And when you're running something like this, you're not churning the gears through big, heavy gear oil when it's -30 out. You don't have all that rotating mass of those big, heavy steel gears. These things have lightweight aluminum gears, probably going to shave about 5 pounds off your sled. No gear oil in there, and no more heavy gears. You're going to have quicker throttle response, more power freed up, and you're going to have a lot more fun. Now let's get this installed. Don't be intimidated by this. This is going to really make an improvement to your sled. Got to take out your little suitcase here. I would say that this job is a little more time consuming than difficult. And by time consuming, I'm sure I can have this wrapped up in about an hour, maybe less, 45 minutes if I were just doing this without any camera work. But the benefits are great. Now these springs are facing away from you, so you just gotta yes. Now just make sure you put everything in a box. If you're anything like me, you are going to lose your parts. That's 25 pounds. It's too heavy. These springs, so I don't forget them. Ryan's pretty particular about his sled, so I want to make sure that we don't break anything or leave anything behind. Battery out of here. Oh yeah, sure. 10 mil bolt in the top. There. I'm a pretty firm believer in these belt drives. I put one in my ZX chassis, in my Rev chassis, which is basically the same type. Keely's putting one in his Rev. I've beat on them pretty hard and I haven't had any issues. Seriously, electric start. Why put an electric start on your snowmobile? I'm just going to pop off this top cap. I'm going to see if I can get my Liquivac down in here and suck out some of that oil. This is probably one of the best inventions ever made by man. This is Liquivac. Now there's a constant source of vacuum in there. This really does save a lot of time and a lot of mess. I use it for coolant, gear oil, transmission fluid. That small hose goes right in your transmission dipstick. If it's, if you overfill it. And this is available from Thermoboat in British Columbia. And it's good for pulling old gas out of the sled. If you've just pulled an old sled out of the field, This thing is an amazing, amazing tool to have by. Now there's still gonna be some mess, but we got most of that gear oil out, and that's what you want, because that stuff is horrible stuff to work with. That's one of the big bonuses putting this belt drive in. You don't have to deal with that anymore. You can also change your gear ratio really quickly. Because of the type of tensioner on it, you can change the gears without having to change the belt all the time. With the regular chain drive, you have to change the chain every time you change the gears. It's a bit of a pain in the butt. Not with this system. Now, let me see. So this is your Skidoo connection right here. Just unpop that. Look at that. We pretty much got all that gear oil out of there. That's awesome. That Liquivac took everything out. That's all we had. Sweet. Loosen off the tensioner here. They also make 6 different upper gears, so you can change your gear ratios to suit your needs. If you're a racer or you want to gear down for playing in the powder and the deep stuff, you can do that too. You have a lot of options as far as gearing and ratios go. Put your parking brake on, or get your son to hold the brake if he's around. It usually has some Loctite on there, so it's held in quite well. This lower gear has a big clip on it, a big circlip. I'm just going to stick this in here. Sweet baby Lord Jesus. There we go. I think that's going to be the trickiest part of the whole thing. Gear out. It's a 45 bottom and a 21 top. Just for future reference, I've got to get this Skidoo sender out. It's a little tricky, but if you work your driver in one side and then get on the other side and do the same thing, you can work it out. There's a little bit of vacuum in there, you can hear it. Now you're not going to need this. C3 provides a custom-made sending unit. Now that I've got everything out of here, I'm just going to clean all this old gear oil out. If you don't, it's going to collect all kinds of dirt and debris. It's going to look nasty in there. This whole chain case is going to be open, except for the bottom part. There's a protector that goes in there, but all that old gear oil will collect a lot of dirt and dust. Let's get rid of that and make it nice and clean. According to the instructions, if your sled has more than 400 miles on it, you've got to pull these bearing seals, because the gear oil gets in there, loosens up the grease. It'll eventually break down on you because now you're putting the belt drive in, you don't have the oil and the gear oil going up in there and lubing everything anymore. So pull that seal, pack everything with grease again. Now this sled has about 400 kilometers on it. We check the grease in there, everything's good to go. I'll put this retaining clip back in here. You should hear that snap go in there. Now we're going to leave that spacer on the upper shaft. Install that. I'm going to put the belt in. I always put a belt on so that I can read the writing. I don't know if it really makes a difference for this one, but that's the way I do it. This big washer goes on the bottom drive axle. Push that in. Then the gear with this flange goes in. There we go. See that? Now Kevin supplies all the bolts and all the hardware you're going to need. And this is the upper bolt for the jack shaft that came with it. I think I want to get rid of that one. Use the supplied bolt. So when you put this washer on, make sure that it's cupped towards the shaft. That way it locks it in there really well. And you're going to want to use some red Loctite. And you're just going to put that in there finger tight for now. And that's it. I'll be torquing that up in a minute. Now we're going to install the top gear. I love when this thing starts to come together because it's such an awesome looking kit. Can't spin it while the brake's on. Now I've lined up the holes on the flange that we just installed. Now you're going to want to install this outer flange. So I'm just threading these bolts through here. Now when all your bolts are through, just go ahead and put a little bit of blue Loctite on everything. And we'll install it. So you want to make sure that when you tighten up this nut here, actually you want to leave it a little loose so that it can slide through the track to tension it. You don't want it too loose that this is actually going to go cockeyed on you when you try to tighten it, because then your belt won't be set up right. So for now, put that in place. At this point, everything is more or less just kind of finger tight on every part of this install. So now I'm just going to tighten up this tensioner plate and then come back and torque each one of these 3 hex bolts to 12 pounds. Yes, okay, old school. Probably not the most accurate thing, but Keeley hasn't cleaned up the shop lately, and I don't know where my good one is. So now it's time to put the cold tension on this, or the initial tension. You're going to get rid of your old tensioning bolt. You're going to use the supplied bolt that C3 sends with it. And there's a new place that it screws into here. Just get it in there. Now for this cold tensioning, you're just going to use your thumb inside this little metered hole here, and then put your index finger on the idler assembly, or tensioner assembly, and you're just going to pull it. And you're going to tighten this up. Just finger tight. That's it. That's going to be your initial cold tension. Everything sort of needs to get aligned in here, get set up, and then we can torque everything in, take it out, warm it up, then check the tension again and set it up properly. Now it's time to fasten and secure the lower gear. And to do that, we're just going to use this little taper lock system that he has. It's actually quite an ingenious little thing. As it pulls through, it squeezes or pushes up on the inside of the shaft and locks it into place. So you take this smaller part of the cam here, you put it inside the shaft. There's a little lip in there that it just grabs onto. That's it. See, it won't come out. Then you just slip this in. There we go. There we go. So that's into place. That's pulled into place right now. I'm just going to pull out that bolt that we used to set that into place. Now it's time to set the pickup in. It's got these little magnets in here, your magnetic pickup for your Speedo. And that also holds on your bottom gear. Now that I've got that in there, I'm going to tighten that up or torque it up to 38 foot-pounds. Generally speaking, that's what most of the larger bolts are torqued to. And Kevin will tell you that initially when you start to tighten this, it's going to seem like it just kind of goes forever. But that little locking system of his is doing its thing. It's tightening up. I know I'm going to get emails on this. You shouldn't use that torque wrench. That's it. 38 pounds. Okay, now I've got to come in, tighten up the top one. This one's 38 foot-pounds as well. Nice. And then each of these here are 12 foot-pounds. Now we're working on the deflection and the tension of the belt. Before we've done anything, the belt is just sitting more or less static or neutral right now. We're going to just mark with this dry erase marker where it sits. I just put this little mark right here. Okay. Now, just with finger tension, that belt should move 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. And I'm looking at, what's that? That's 5/8, right? That's about 5/8 right there. Now with that 5/8 deflection or 3/4, you know, between 5/8 and 3/4 deflection, some of you are going to say that I can push harder or you can push harder with your thumb or your finger. Well, they've done testing on it and the average person can put about 20 pounds of force on that belt with their finger no matter how hard they push. After that, the belt just will not give any. So that's the initial cold setup. Now all I have to do, tension the wheel, and lock my nut. Lock my nut. There we go. Now that we've run that up, that was just, you know, just rotated the belt or the track a few times. I'm just going to check that deflection again, make sure I have that 5/8 to 3/4. And that's what I have. And the reason I just did that was because the belt may have been sitting up on top of the cogs, and it might have just, you know, through rotating it, it might have sat down in there, giving it a little bit of extra room, and then I'd have to retension it. But right now, that's good. That's a good setup cold. Now it's time to throw everything back together. I'm going to take it out, warm it up, and then come back, check the tension, make sure everything's set up right. The main thing is with these, you can't have this belt too tight to start because everything starts to heat up eventually. The gears, they start to expand, and if the belt's too tight, that's when you're going to run into a problem. That's when something's going to break down. You don't want to do that. So now I got to take this out, try it out, come back, check belt deflection again. I'm just going to pop this speed sensor out and get it ready to install. Just sort of put your screwdriver under there. Start to just work away along it. Pop it up. You want to be careful with that. Wow. And be really careful with it when it's not yours. Snowmobile. That's it. Just a magnetic pickup. Now, I can install that in here. This really doesn't mount onto here as much as it does into this little mechanism. So I'm going to just RTV this into place. And then I'll install it into that. So I'm going to put this sensor into place. I'm not going to fill this area up right here because you don't need to. But I am going to fill this up here. I'm just going to let that set up overnight, and then I can install this cover tomorrow. That's it. I've let this set up overnight. It's nice and solid. Sensor's clear. I've got the RTV at the back here holding these wires in place. And I also put a bit of black electrical tape around this top part of the wire, just so it doesn't have a tendency to want to roll out there on me. So this is good to go. I'm going to install that on the machine right now. And I'm going to show you a little trick that Kevin at C3 PowerSports came up with. The bolt goes in the cover, spacer goes in behind, then there's a little O-ring. You just slip it over top of the bolt, and it's going to stay there. It's going to hold everything in place, so you can actually get it fitted, tightened up, and it's going to get crushed, and you don't even have to worry about it. But it's just there to hold everything in place. Makes your life a little easier. To help you get this chain case cover in, belt drive cover, unloosen this here. I'm just going to hook up the Skidoo pickup. Okay. This here I'm going to just bolt into place loose like. It's time to take this out and run it up. We have our belt deflection. It's all set up cold. Now I need to warm everything up, get those gears warm, the belt warm, everything is going to expand. We're going to want about 1/4 inch deflection when it's warm. That's what I'm going to do now. Take it for a rip, come back in, check it, then we'll do it again. The really important thing with this whole belt setup is that it is set up correctly. You can't run too loose or too tight or you're definitely going to break it. So I want to make sure I do this properly. It's Ryan's sled. And it's a good setup, so I'm not going to mess this up. $17mm wrench. That's not it. Boy, there's a den of activity in here today. It's just crazy getting ready for the season. All right, I'm going to pop this off. So I took this out. I didn't run it hard. I just warmed the belt up. It's the initial run. I don't want to push it too much because I don't want to strip out that belt and break it. So, pop this can out of here. So I've got just over 5/8. I'm more about 3/4 of an inch of deflection right now. So I'm going to tighten up. Everything's warm. You can actually feel it. It's a lot warmer than when I started. So now's the time to tension that up. So back off my lock nut. Now it's important when you loosen off this tensioner wheel bolt that it's just barely loose. It should just be able to slide in the groove. And then you're going to want to tighten it up here. If it's too loose, the tensioner assembly is going to sort of turn cockeyed or a little crooked in there. You don't want that to happen. It's actually amazing how much that's loosened up. So that's my 1/4 inch right there. I'll tighten this up. I'm going to take it out and give it a good run. A little bit harder than what I did last time. I'm going to come in and check it again. You know, they stress the importance of going out, doing this a few times, checking it, testing it, tightening it up, backing it off if it needs it. You got to get that 1/4 inch deflection when it's hot. Eventually I'm going to really run this thing hard, and then I always want that 1/4 inch deflection on there. All right. Let's do it. I've probably taken this out about 5 or 6 times, and I'm just getting slight variations in belt tension here. Well, actually I just need to sort of tighten it up a little bit every time. Well, this is going to be my last one for now until we take it on a big haul. That's it. Let me just check that. Get my finger in. That's 1/4 inch right there. Okay. Now I'm going to buckle this together. So something you need to keep in mind that I just found out when I put this all back together. This is an electric start sled. It doesn't have a pull start on it yet. We're going to install one, but the battery has to come out a little bit because of the adjustment nut on the tensioner. Just makes it a little tighter for that door to close, but you can still do it. So I've got this set up 5 or 6 times. All it really needs now is, you know, a really good run, a day of running, checking the tension, resetting it, checking it again. And once it's set up, after you've run it a whole bunch of times, once you've got that 1/4 inch, after a full day of running, you're good to go. Every once in a while, get back in there, just check it. It's, you know, part of a regular maintenance thing that you would do on your sled anyway. You want to make sure your chain is tight. If you have a chain system, your belt system, you want to make sure that's set up properly as well. Now the boys at C3 PowerSports wanted me to tell you that they have this Synchro drive system for just about every sled made now. He's got them for the wedge chassis back about 20 years, the Revs, the XPs. With this whole new system that he's made, you know, he's always constantly upgrading these parts, everything that goes on this system. He's been able to knock the price down on them about $100. So, you know, it's a very cheap investment. You get to lower your weight, get to lower your rotating mass, more throttle response. I can tell you these things really work. I've been running them for the last year now, and I'm totally in love with the setup. You should also check out their post-forward kit they have for the XM and the XP chassis. You get to move it, depending on the style, you get to move it about 2 inches to 4 inches further, which is awesome. Gets you more in front of your sled, which is what you want as well. Keep that front end down when you're pulling the big pulls. So I gotta thank you guys for showing up. Make sure you check out C3 PowerSports on the web and on Facebook. Make sure you join us on Facebook for some cool giveaways. Thanks for watching.